we're in such a rapid state of tech growth in public safety that we have the opportunity to kind of like we got the momentum and we need to exploit that momentum and use it before they figure it out. Once they figure it out,
Yeah,
then
once
our
they've
technology is
reoriented to it,
no
then
good. We want to be supported by our citizenry and the constituency of these elected officials. We want that support. So we want to talk about the things that we're using. We want to showcase our successes, but at what cost? Because the cost is giving up Tradecraft. The cost is explaining how we do things so somebody else could then use it against us. So it's a balancing act of how much do we give up? How much do we talk about? And is showcasing what we do actually counterproductive to us?
all
Hey,
right,
Lou
hit it.
Hayes, welcome to No Way Out. It's been a while since we've last connected. What's going on in Chicagoland, man? Give us some background.
Yeah, there's no politics going on, nothing at the national level. Everything's good.
Well, good. We'll end it right there then. Cheers.
No,
Oh,
that
man.
was a great show.
So
Yeah, hey, I do want to talk about what you were doing last week with the RTCCs, real time. What's the CC mean again?
Crime Center.
Yeah, so you must have all this software technology and all of these amazing whiz bang tools. So tell us a little bit about that and what's going on in policing when it comes to building situational awareness, getting inside the loops of criminals and that type of thing.
Yeah, so first let's talk about what Chicagoland is. Right? It's a huge city that's surrounded by a bunch of very small municipal suburbs to the tune of 250 to 300 of them. So what we're trying to do is connect all of those suburbs and city and county and state and federal police agencies together using software and communications platforms. I work for one of those small suburbs. I've had some cool experiences working with task forces, kind of opened my eyes into what's possible. So when we're talking about the technology, it's another set of eyes and ears out in the field that's helping us become more efficient with observing, sensing, making sense of what's going on out there. And it's basically growing faster than we know how to deal with it, both on policy level, tactically using it or technically using it, and then morally using it. So I think it's a perfect mental, moral, physical kind of discussion.
Yeah. So what kind of tech are we talking about? Are you talking about like sensors, cameras, drones? What is giving you guys other eyes and ears out
Yeah, we're using cameras that have certain sensors or algorithms for movements and identifying objects. We're dealing with drones, both that are getting deployed out of police cars' trunks, but also a drone as first responder program. So now we're launching drones straight from rooftops of government buildings right onto the scenes of 911 calls and helping with our surveillances out there.
we're right before you came on, Moose and I were talking about the use of technology to compress timelines. So in a first responder situation, launching a drone or a platform from the roof of a government building, what advantage does that give you to sending a fire truck or a police unit or other to the scene?
Well, a lot of it is just that time. We're seeing, depending on how close you are to that drone and how much overlap you want to give these different coverage areas, you get on scene in under 60 seconds when it's going to take a police car 2 minutes, 3 minutes. That's fast on the ground, 3 minutes. So, I mean, we're at worst having this. And in many cases, it's like 1/5 of the response time.
Yeah. So it's a force multiplier, and I don't mean like physical force, but allows you to get more capability to your to provide safety to folks in your area. I'm kind of curious though. Where is a lot of a lot of these ideas coming from? Are you borrowing them from other um, police units around you, or looking at New York, looking at Seattle? Where are these ideas originating from?
I think a lot of it's coming out of the military, the private security industry. They've got a lot less bureaucracy to contend with. The private industry I'm talking about, not the military. Private industry's got a lot less bureaucracy to fight through to put some of this technology in place. So they're able to iterate fast. They're able to put product out really quickly, whereas government moves slow, sometimes like chilled molasses. And you gotta have policies, procedures, and surveys and tests, and you gotta run all that stuff. That 6 months, 12 months worth of T&E. So we're yeah, we're getting a lot from private industry and then trying to adapt it to what we're doing.
And do you have a budget to do this, or is this? I mean, how do you get money to do it? Is it top down? And I mean, where's this coming from? Is it coming from those that are closest to the work, or is it coming from above? Is it coming from the politicians? Who's demanding this? And if not, where is the demand signal coming from?
I don't think it's consistent across the board. I came at it a little bit differently than most of my peers in that National Real-Time Crime Center Association and just across the country in general. I came at it from a detective that was running surveillance. And when we're trying to use this to help with surveillance, using different types of surveillance technology that I'm really not going to talk about, but using surveillance technology and then building desks to support surveillance cars in the field is where I came at this problem from. This wasn't to support 911 calls and patrol cars. And that's a radical difference. So by me, the push came from folks like myself that are out in covert vehicles conducting surveillances on career criminals. Whereas in other places, it's coming from the top levels of government, like mayors and managers and elected officials that have seen something in the news, have seen something in a government publication and say, my city or my county needs this kind of technology, and is then being funded from those top levels. And the thing is that a lot of this can be done on shoestring budgets. A lot of the crime desk stuff, the actual desks that folks are sitting at receiving all these sensors, it's just logging into systems that you already have access to and putting a person there to be the central collection point.
Yeah. So I come from the world of air and space operations, where we have theater battle management core system, hundreds of millions of dollars in these capabilities to put that 1,000-mile screwdriver out there so we can have a 3 or 4 star say, hey, move this tanker over there and do that. That's not what we want to do, by the way, but that's what ends up happening. Hundreds of millions of dollars spent on this. The origins of things like Slack come from what we've learned in the Air and Space Operations Center 20, 30 years ago. So all that wasn't new to us when it came to us in the private world. But that is not what you're trying to do, correct? You don't need hundreds of millions of dollars of capability to do this. You just need small incremental capabilities. Am I right or wrong there?
Well, it depends on the need. And this
Mhm.
is where this is where I keep on debating my own community on this is what is the need you're trying to satisfy? Because if the need is to support folks in the field, you don't need a whole lot in the office. But if your need is to be recognized as having a good command center, then that's going to look totally different. So what is the need you're trying to fulfill? If it's like trying to keep up with the Joneses next door, saying like that other agency's got this big command center, there's LED lighting and awesome logo on the wall and ginormous video screens, then you're going to invest differently in it.
Isn't that the same as saying, do you want to be something or do you want to do something?
That's exactly it.
Yeah. Yeah. You can have this awesome optics of an operations center that has, the illusions of federated command and control, if you want to put it that way, or distributed leadership, or however you want to put it, the illusion of that, or you can actually go after that. And I think that's what I saw you write in the last few weeks after your experience down in Atlanta is just that is what is the desired outcome if you're trying to reduce crime, if you're trying to do increase response times. This is, I think, the direction you're talking about. The application you're using is going to achieve that. Whereas if you follow the military approach, and I'm not saying not to follow this, by the way, I'm just saying that's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to give you the illusion of control, illusion of operational centers, and of course the ability to go take a photo op in there to go, hey, look what we're doing, all this money, but it's not going to fix anything. Moose, any thoughts on that, brother?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Lou, it seems like what you're describing is like systems that enhance orientation and compress OODA loops at many scales, from the officer down on the front lines, maybe if they're surveilling or walking a beat or whatever, and all the way up to the strategic level of law enforcement too. It just seems that the systems hopefully improve implicit guidance and control that make for speedier OODA loops.
Yeah, and I think we have to ask ourselves is who's driving the strategic changes or the strategic shifts?
Mm-hmm.
Is it people running tech or is it people doing the job in the field?
Mm-hmm. Do you think that a lot of there's a lot of the designers of those softwares, are they connected enough to the people down the deck that they understand really what an officer goes through when they're doing surveillance in a covert car, for example?
It's going to depend on the company. Because we run so many different types of systems in my area and in my center, those developers and engineers actually fly out to us. They ride with us in the field to see
Mhm.
what it's like on the other end of this. Because
Yeah.
it's like this is the person that you're supporting. You're not supporting the person at the desk. You're supporting the person in the field through the person on the desk. Many times the response has been, I never realized you used this technology in this way. I'm like, you mean we're using it in a way it wasn't designed? Like, we didn't even know how it was designed because the training program was so horrible. We had to
Mm.
figure this out by ourselves. We learned all the hacks and the shortcuts and the workarounds, and then we realized that that's more efficient than the way it was actually designed.
So I'm curious.
I mean, so there's a ideally then there's a bottom up and a top down and a lateral, right? Where everything again, you would hope that the orientation is open and learning and feedback is appreciated and you gain more perspectives. I mean, it seems like the way you're describing it is like that people came down to gain the perspective of the officer out on the front lines to figure out what exactly he needs from a system that's going to enhance again orientation, right? And speed up and compress those OODA loops versus the opponent, the person you're surveilling or the suspect, the offender, whatever for the proper
The jaywalker, is that what you're concerned about there?
But yes, that's the big problem.
Yeah. So that we may get into the moral, mental, physical side of this here
well,
in a
let me
second.
can I ask Lou this? Do you find that the human qualities of policing wane at all because of an over reliance on technology? Does technology become so pervasive or so helpful or so useful that it starts to wane the human aspects of policing that are still important?
Yeah, I think we first started seeing this with digital forensics, which is the extraction of data coming out of cell phones, social media accounts, computer systems. That's been, 15 years. And everybody's got digital forensics capabilities now to do these examinations on all these personal devices.
Mm.
And that's when we started seeing a reduction in the quality of interviews and interrogations.
Tell
More
us
about
more
that.
about
Yeah.
that. 'Cause Ponch and I were just having a conversation about this types of thing.
Well,
Like
we're now st- we're,
from the like the quality of it slipping, like from an interrogation standpoint. Give us some color on it.
Yeah, and I don't want to blame the reliance on digital forensics. Maybe it's just the digitization of the entire society. Is this because we now have police officers that were raised on cell phones and social media that now their interpersonal skills are lacking? I don't necessarily think that it had to do with the digital forensics and policing units, meaning that our detectives can't talk to people. Maybe just society in general has a difficult time talking to people. If you know what I'm saying? So you can't discount getting out of a police car and talking to people on the street,
What you
walking
talk?
into shops,
Yeah.
talking to merchants, walking into a park, talking to moms and dads and grandmas. Like
Yeah.
that aspect of policing cannot be discounted. But when you're glued to a screen waiting for the next alert to go off telling you where the bad guy is, that
Yeah.
that's not helping us.
So that gets into
It's all
finger
it
spitting of fuel, right? Yeah. So that's you got to have that mission command, that leader's intent. That it's the same application. You got to get out there and feel what's going on, right? You got to be part of the system. You can't
it's like
be.
you were saying, Punch, about the Top Gun bros. They pointed out to John Boyd that the human in the system is still the most important factor. The tech is
Yes.
not enough, or the
Yeah.
equations are not enough, or whatever.
Yeah, or just get back to the basics of people, ideas, and things in that order. So I think a
Yeah.
lot of folks, even yesterday, and we're recording this the day after Secretary of War Hegseth went to Quantico, which the last time I saw Lou Hayes, I believe, was we were in Quantico. Or there may have been a time after that, actually. But people are upset because a leader did just that, right? Got the interaction, got the face-to-face time. By the way, a lot of folks that are upset about that, their orientation, the way they sell themselves to companies is exactly what Lou just said is you got to get out there, you got to do the face-to-face interaction, you got to get out there and share your intent. And I think that's what policing is about intent. Our intent is to protect you, is to make sure there's a presence, to make sure laws are followed, right? It's not to come here and arrest you. right? I mean, that may be what the end state could be. But again, it's that presence of leadership, that leadership by walking around. And I think that's Lou, is that what you're really talking about?
Yeah, and I think we've lost that because you're now glued to a screen that's receiving dozens of sensor types, and you're trying to be efficient, right? But in being efficient, you're almost losing effectiveness, right? You're optimizing the wrong thing.
It's funny you bring that up. Companies are now talking about operational effectiveness, and they think that we can come in there and just help them with technology. And it comes back down to the basics. It's the human side of things. How do you interact with not just with your technology, but with other humans? And you and I know that human sense making or sense making requires people at the tip of the spear, people out there doing things. And again, I want to bring back that Fingerspitzengefühl. You got to have that fingertip feel of what's going on in the environment, and you don't get that from behind a desk, right? So the lessons here are not unique to policing. These are the same things that organizational leaders need to understand. You can't just manage by email, manage by conference calls. You got to get out there and feel it, right? So, and Lou, I think the application of I'll just call it what John Boyd gave us, the understanding of how to get out there and be part of the system is what you're doing. Can you build on that some more?
So all this technology is, and if we're using the technology for crime fighting, which is the bulk of what it's being used for, it's investigating, preventing, interrupting crime, and then ultimately apprehending the offenders. That's what most of this technology is really good at. So what it still requires is police officers being in the field, putting handcuffs on people, right? You still need to stop the speeding car. You still need to find them hiding under the porch. You still need to go hands-on with these folks. You're never going to remove that aspect of policing. I was just looking back at pictures from my department from over 100 years ago. And I said, not much has really changed about the people. Like, I have a gun, handcuffs, and like we're still doing pretty much the same thing. Now, yeah, I drive a car. I could get places faster, but I still need to confront bad people in bad places. And when I look at Boyd's OODA loop, I look at these real-time crime centers being efficient versions of observe. And then I look at the orientation phase as being this repository of collective intelligence. So we can have intelligence bulletins that are pushed out with the intention to get everybody on the same page. So we're all operating from the same mental modeling of what the world looks like, what crime looks like. But none of that matters if you don't have a good strategy, right? And the strategy is going to change based on the type of information that you can bring in. That if you're able to bring in certain sensors or get certain alerts, your strategy needs to change every time you bring in a new bit of technology. But the human portion is that action, is that you have to actually do something and intervene in the real world, right? That's the piece that a lot of folks building the technology don't understand.
Right. So what you described there is, we get into theory every now and then and affordances with and medium is the message. And I'm sure Moose will bring more of that in here in a second. But the idea is as you get more technology, the adjacent possible, we have more possibilities, which means we have to adapt our strategy. We have to understand the external environment, those new technologies that not only we have, but possibly what the criminals have, right? And that drives our strategy. Does that work with both of you guys?
For
I
sure.
think so. Yeah.
I mean, to take, for example, I didn't work with drones in the beginning of my career, but then as the career progressed, I started working with helicopters and airplanes. So air assets, which are very expensive. You're burning fuel and these sometimes hard to get up. They're hard to get to your area. But then drones came up, and this is basically mini helicopter, mini airplane at your disposal. And the teams that work with the helicopters have a much easier time jumping to working with drones than those that are just now starting to work with drones. Because when you have somebody that's overhead you in a helicopter or watching on a screen what that drone video looks like, you should behave differently on the ground. Your strategy is different. You let air units kind of find things for you. There's thermal images, there's night vision, there's different capabilities that they have that changes what you do on the ground. It changes your action. It changes your strategy.
It adds perspective. It helps add perspective and uncover blind spots. They can loiter longer. They can sustain longer. right?
You
Is
know,
it?
Moose, this kind of reminds me of our like a TAC P program or a FAC A program in the military, where in the Marines, and let's talk about the Marines. Marines love to have a TAC P or a FAC A, actually a TAC P who has an aviation background because they know
Yeah.
what they bring. They understand the capabilities, right? And I think, Lou, do you guys ever integrate people that have that? Let's just say somebody's flying a drone or working in drones. You ever bring them to work with the police officers in the field directly without, just to understand what the context is? Have you guys looked into that yet?
For sure. And some of the strongest folks that are up in the planes, like the observers, not the pilots. I mean, a lot of times the pilots is a contractor, right? And like never been the police. They're just moving the observation platform around. But the person that's directing them to where to go, working the cameras, they've all come from a ground perspective. And the best ones are ones that have come from Canine.
Wow.
Why is
So
that?
the Canine teams just run a lot of searches, a lot of perimeters, just so much more coordination on the ground that they can now set that up from, 900 feet up or 1500 feet up. It's almost like you could tell who's been a canine operator by just the way that they talk from the.
Huh.
Are you guys, go ahead, Moose.
Yeah. What kind of dogs do they still use? German Shepherds? And the reason I ask is because somebody had sent me a reel recently about the Belgian Malinois, and I had no idea that was a type of police dog that could like scale fences that Michael Jordan couldn't even get to the top of. Like, what the hell? You seen those?
Yeah, so German Shepherds, Dutch Shepherds are still big. The Belgian Malinois keep gaining in market share there. But if you were to give me a dog, I'd take a bloodhound any day. It's not going to bite you, but it comes down to sensing, right? It's going to be able to distinguish that scent, find a scent cone and start working in an area. And then you've got those biting dogs behind you. But like,
well, the Belgian Malinois looks like a bionic dog, like a German Shepherd with better fitness and a cocaine habit or something.
yeah, but again, to be or to do, right?
Yeah, right. They're doing.
Yeah, the bloodhounds, the way that they can distinguish scent, right, is just far superior. So when you're coming into basically sense making, right, it's the scent that they're picking up and distinguishing one particular scent amongst what could be dozens that they're following.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Like we haven't been able to find tech to do that yet.
Well, it sounds to me like what you're doing is kind of putting an orchestra or jazz ensemble or a rock band together. Is everybody has a capability, but to harmonize them, and I think that's what the RTCC is doing, right? How do you harmonize, not align, but bring these folks together, and not just folks, but sensors, including the dogs. How you bring it together to make sense of the environment so you can have a better picture and you can be more effective and efficient in it. So, hey, are you guys capturing any of this? I mean, what's the doctrine on, if there's any doctrine or dogma, or who are the thought leaders in this space?
It's rough. I mean, the National Real-Time Crime Center Association has got most of the smartest people in the space working on this. And what I appreciate about it is they bring in diverse sets of opinions on it. Folks that have come at it from different spaces, like 911, right? I mean, 911 from the call taker and dispatcher perspective is like being completely upended by these real-time technologies. So 911, the technology vendors, the crime analysts, detectives and surveillance teams, patrol air units, right? Like they're all coming at it with different experiences, trying to figure out what we're going to build locally. Because what works well in Chicagoland may not work well in some other area. How does a small suburb like mine fit into the greater Chicagoland picture is much different than how do we build this within New York City or Los Angeles.
So, hey, I'm kind of wondering this, when it comes to teaming, you and I've talked about teaming in the past, but like communication brevity, building situational awareness, transferring leadership, planning and debriefing, those type of things. Do you have any gaps in that? I mean, are you seeing any like gaps as you start to integrate all this type of thinking?
Yeah, like there's a lot of gaps, right? And the teams that can bridge those are the ones that are more successful.
How are they bridging them?
Yes. Yeah. So for example, we started using Slack. And what Slack has been able to do is bring us a safe and secure environment with certain compliance requirements by the government, and to share information, basically crowdsourcing it from our 911 centers, our intel people, our air units. We bring them all together. So we start having basically open conversations on a bulletin board type environment that gets us all together on the same page. This is what we know. This is what we believe. This is the background on it. And this is what we want to do about it. This is high level strategic overview and direction. Here's who's in charge of this. And here's the other radio channels that we're going to be communicating on. And that gives us the ability to share documents, links, maps, text files, video clips, all sorts of things. So we're all operating on the best. What it does is it democratizes all this information across a region. So instead of having disparate hubs, like different 911 centers operating on different platforms that don't talk to one another, we're able to say, despite that, we need to have some conduit that allows like for some sense of flow. So it becomes our flow system for information. It's where everybody can put in and everybody can take out of that platform. That's kind of been the bridge for us. Despite what technologies that you're using as an individual agency, officer, organization, or region, we could bring you together using one common platform.
Let me ask you this. Are you including Joe Civilian in any of these conversations? Do you look at the population as part of an extension of the team, or where does that come in?
So it's tricky because you need to maintain a separation between sensitive information, right? So certain things need to be compartmentalized. We do have workspaces that bring in private sector. So security, loss prevention, like organized retail crime teams within a lot of the big box stores, because they've got their own sensor networks out there. They know who's committing a lot of these organized retail crimes that they didn't share. So now we're developing networks to pull from their information, us sharing certain information with them as well. So I think the first phase of this is organized retail. And then there's always going to be some open source or social media teams within the police that are monitoring, the Ring, Neighbors, Citizen, those different platforms, because those are going to be videos or in a way alerts for us to follow up on.
Would organized retail be like smash and grabs? Like they smash open jewelry store windows and steal watches, like that kind of organized retail? Or
it could be. There's no real bounds on what's organized retail crime. I mean, sometimes burglary is considered that, but I mean, we could even be talking about hijacked cargo loads. Like 50-foot trailers that are being hijacked by different transport companies.
Interesting.
Lou,
Punch? What about the constraints in some urban areas that have said, you can shoplift up to $900? Like you've seen some of these cities that have basically crime sprees are been fairly common because you can basically steal up to a certain amount. How does that affect the human angle of policing? How does that affect an officer on the ground?
I mean, I think it demoralizes them more than anything.
Yeah.
You start crushing the will of the police that say, is this even worth it anymore? Like, why should I risk myself in going after this if nothing's going to happen?
Is that happening in Chicago then, Lou? Is that happening now? I mean, are police officers?
I don't know about happening. It's happened.
Okay.
Right. Under different state's attorneys. Again, Chicagoland has got Cook County surrounded by a bunch of collar counties. And you could take DuPage County, which is a very tough on crime county with a very staunch supporter of the police in the state's attorney's office. That was in stark contrast to our previous state's attorney in Cook County, which was instituting these arbitrary benchmarks for retail crimes. So it was very demoralizing knowing that it was hard to get gun crimes and retail thefts and burglary charges getting approved. But new state's attorney in Cook County, things have definitely changed. She's doing a much better job. She's reducing the benchmarks for securing these indictments. So when I hear her speak in front of us, like, it energizes me because now you get a different posture.
I think when I was there with you in Chicago, you talked about this a little bit. This is several years ago, where talking about systems drive behaviors is you would walk me through where, hey, this is where you're going to see a lot of crime, and over here you're going to see these. There's not going to be a lot. It's not going to be a lot of crime in this space, right across the street from each other, whatever it may be. But that system driving behaviors, you've seen that with what Moose brought up with the $900 benchmark or line there for retail theft, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
the environment
Moose.
adapts too, because you said, you're talking about being on the ground and interacting with the environment. Like, I live here in Manhattan, and the CVS right here on the corner here in the West Village, there was a time where like razors and certain things were behind a lock and you have to push the button and the guy comes. Now it's like almost everything. So if you want to get gummy bears for your kid, you have to push a button, and like more and more and more aisles have these plastic things with the locks on it. I had two other medium is the message comments. One was about here in Manhattan. I noticed, I'll be there in a little bit going through Penn Station, and you see these cops and they're all on their phones. Like they're all looking down at their phones, almost all of them. Not, it's just a general observation, because you're talking about how some of these younger cops, they grew up in an age of technology where someone like me, born in 1976, did not, right? So I also noticed that, to your point about like situational awareness and going into the communities and going into the stores, if you ask a cop directions in New York City, they have to look at their phones. They don't know the neighborhoods like they used to. In the old days, you could ask a cop anything, and anywhere in the 5 boroughs, and he could tell you how to get there. Now, like, where's this right around here? They have to all look at their phones. That's the trend anyway. Just a crude observation with no data other than my own. But the other thing I was going to ask, you mentioned our animal friends that work in the policing. What about horses?
Horses have kind of come out of favor lately. I think they're super expensive, and it seems like a lot of cities just kind of let you protest and burn the city down, right? So what do you need a horse for then? I mean, they're beautiful animals, and they're super effective at busting up crowds, but crowd busting mentality kind of has gone away from most police forces.
Yeah, interesting.
I wonder if you could talk about the type of criminals out there. What's it? More organized crime, more crime in general. What are the trends that you're seeing, and what are the possible threats if they're listening to this? Which hopefully they're not.
So back, I don't know, 10, a dozen or so years ago, we started seeing street gangs moving away from street corner drug dealing into much more structured identity theft and financial crimes. I saw the vast majority of our caseload that was dealing with identity theft, bank customer impersonation, a variety of frauds that were coming out of the very exact neighborhoods that were typically selling drugs on street corners. And it's safer, it's more anonymous, it's easier to get away with. And now as you start adding technology to the piece, like mobile deposits on phones, I mean, COVID was contactless everything, right? You just saw identity theft type crimes just absolutely skyrocket. So more sophistication in terms of these scams of pig butchering coming from, which is basically confidence schemes that get you to start investments or, lend me some money. Bitcoin scams,
Yeah.
like grandparent scams where
So
somebody pretends to be
yeah,
grandkid. And need
so
the money.
my dad was scammed out about 200K on a crypto scam. And it was, we unfortunately we caught it late. But can you talk a little bit more about that for people over the age of 60, over 50 that are interested in making money? How are they targeting their orientation, these criminals? What are they doing to get inside their OODA loops?
So some of it is by sharing small amount. So you start by investing a small amount of money, right? As a victim, you invest a small amount of money, and you're taken to some dashboard that's showing your profits and your interest going up and up and up. Well, that's fake. That's something that it's artificial. It's manufactured to show you that your investments are good. So you want to put more in it and more in it. It's not, your money's not being invested. Your money's already been taken out of the system. So all you see is fake feedback, right? That feedback is saying my money's growing. Your money's not growing. It's long gone. So that's one of it is you got to be able to trust the system. Like you're not dealing with reputable banks on this. Somebody's selling you on some cheat code that they figured out.
Hmm.
But I've seen them use names that are very similar to reputable banks to do this, and that's how we figured out this was a scam. When I got involved with it with my dad. But I have to know that I've got another question for you: is this being underreported because of the potential embarrassment? All that is this underreported at the moment from your perspective?
Yeah, and we don't know by how much. We have no idea. I mean, especially if your kids are already trying to take away mom's driver's license, take control of or put her in a nursing home, right? Like the last thing you want to do as mom is tell them that, yeah, I'm not even responsible with my money because I gave it up to some scammers,
Yes.
right? Like you want to maintain that sense of independence. Like the Bitcoin ATMs in the corner convenience store, like tell me one legitimate purpose for those. If it's not to perpetrate scams, then it's for money laundering.
Hmm.
Why would you ever put money in and pay those types of fees? Anybody that's an investor, no investor is going to actually use the corner convenience store or gas station Bitcoin ATM.
Yeah. So these criminals are getting smarter, and clearly because of the technology, the medium's changing. But they have access to your background on Facebook. They know who you are. They know your search history. They can target you now, and this is very important. And I think this hasn't been reported much, and I don't see a lot of folks talking about it. But this is a serious threat to um, your life savings. And I'm talking to our parents, our generation, and even us. The latest and greatest AI is able to emulate or copy the voice of a child and call into the home or your cell phone and say, "Dad, it's me. I need money." Right? Are you seeing more of that too? And if so, can you talk about how to mitigate that for victims, potential victims?
I haven't seen a lot of the deep fakes that are kind of being warned against yet. It's coming. That deep fake where somebody's being copied or imitated. But I think that the common theme across all of these scams is I'm here to help you, and it's super important that you do it now, and you don't tell anybody. I'm secretly helping. Listen, no government is secretly helping you ever. Right? Like there are report numbers, and anytime that I call a crime victim, I fully expect to be questioned as to who I actually am. And I'm the real police. And I want folks to call back my agency. I want them to confirm it through badge numbers and IDs and official channels, right? It's like, don't tell anybody. I'm here to help you with your grandson's bond, and it's not super urgent. Like we'll work on your timeline. We'll be accommodating to you. So I think when we talk to pattern recognition, it's somebody from an authoritative position is trying to help you, unsolicited at that, right? Trying to help you that it involves money, involves some sense of urgency, and don't tell anybody else. Like if you could look at that constellation of clues or variables, like that's going to be an indication that you're about to get scanned.
Remember the Nigerian prince emails?
Yeah, we've moved on from.
Those were good ones. How about you know, where the three of us are in three different regions, and the national news has an opinion one way or the other about like immigration and criminals coming over the border. I mean, how does that affect? I mean, again, steering away from the political arguments, but from the actual functional day to day for officers on the deck. I mean, what are the things that they're encountering by and large with non-citizens that have come into the country illegally?
So when there are definitely elements of immigrants and coming in illegally with that undocumented, they're committing crimes. And when they commit crimes, it's very difficult to identify them. They're coming from countries, first off, that don't adopt like this Anglo-Saxon sense of like first name, middle name, last name, right? The naming structure is differently, especially when you're looking at some of the South Americans that are coming up. They have 4 names or 5 names, so it's hard for us to get good identification of who they are, right? And now add in an element that's where they could potentially be kicked out of the country, right? They're worried about They're worried about that. So there's an added incentive to obscure what their names are, right? So it brings in a dynamic that the citizen criminal, it complicates it, right? It's more difficult than dealing with a citizen criminal just by nature of identifying them. And then by connecting them across agencies. So when you're traveling across the country, one of our teams was just made an arrest from somebody from Washington State yesterday, and that person's they're coming from Europe. They're hard to identify because the names are different. So we're trying to figure out fingerprints and DNA and facial recognition technology. Facial recognition has been huge in handling some of the immigrant crime. So, I don't want to get into
and it's not just
whether somebody should.
Isn't it true that it's not just any one region or any one country? I mean, there's people coming.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at foreign nationals that we've arrested within even the last year, it's been from Venezuela, Chile, Colombia, Romania, Italy, England, Ireland. They all got their own scam. And I mean, almost like to a T, almost as if every country's got like their own little, modus operandi, like the type of crime or scam that they're involved in. It's wild. Would have never imagined seeing that.
Hey, Lou, can you talk a little bit about, let's go through a scenario here. And I hear arguments that, hey, the police drew a weapon on somebody. So the mind of a criminal versus the mind of a police officer. So you got a heightened sense of awareness. You're called onto a scene. There's a potential threat out there, and that threat starts charging you, right? Can you walk us through, just based on what you understand about the mind of a police officer and potentially a criminal, what's actually, people are like, the police officer should never shot this person. Well, you're not that police officer. You're not there in that context. You don't have that training. Can you help our listeners understand what it means to be a police officer in this environment today, with being attacked by potentially media, and then being attacked by a criminal, and then the training that they go through, and what's actually going through the processing through their individual OODA loops as they're in that context?
Yeah, that's packed. Like we should probably talk about this for no less than 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's psychologists that look at this all the time, but I think what's important here is, my point of view is when I see a criminal attacking a police officer, I'm like, that's probably the worst thing you could do, man. And let me give you some more context. Years ago, when we went through SEER training for fighter aviation, you are taught if you're shot down and Marines are coming at you with loaded weapons, you don't run at them. They're there to save you, but they also have to clear the area and make sure that you're not a threat to them. They are coming in to shoot, right? That is the mentality that we're taught as fighter, from fighter aviation. If you eject over bad guy land and the Marines come to get you, don't run after them. Don't pull out your gun and run after them, right? So take that type of thinking and apply it to your world, and tell us, help our listeners understand what's.
I think a lot of this comes down to how we train and condition our police. And it's not only through formal training, but it's also through just all these other exposures that they've had. Exposures through watching police TV shows, watching YouTube of police officers being murdered. Trooper Brian Coates was the very first police officer that was ever killed, captured by his dash cam. And it was shown to me in 1998 in the police academy. And it was one of those moments where, like, now my family also needs to watch this. And it became a training tool that started the whole, let's use body cam and dash cam to train our police officers. And when we do that, we let them know of all the bad things that can happen on this job. But I do think there might be almost unintended consequences of developing a hyper paranoia or like a hyper vigilance that becomes unhealthy, right? Because it creates almost a mismatch of reality. So we've got this orientation asymmetry where what you think is going to happen, which is everybody's out to kill you, everything is a threat, is not what reality is. A subsection of it, but how much of that threat really exists? And to what level of acuity does it exist? So that's part of the equation, is what is the mindset that we're putting our police officers through in training? But then there's also, how does the brain operate in times of stress? We could go back to System 1 and System 2 with the works of Kahneman and Klein. And System one being a very primal, naturalistic decision making based on its intuition and a heuristics based. It's the mental shortcuts. And then you've got system two, which is the more analytical and the more rational and the creativity based, which is a much slower type of thinking. So how do our tactics, right? And our tactics being like, how close to the actual threat are we, right? How does that impact if we can maintain that frontal lobe, that system two type of thinking to process better, right? Or are we starting to cut off that frontal lobe and reverting back to more animalistic type thinking? So we're pushing this more strategic mindset in like slowing things down. Don't be aggressing on problems to try to keep the best thinking possible, right? The most explicit types of thinking, right? In OODA loop terms, we don't want to revert everything back to that implicit guidance and control. There will be mistakes and there will be mismatches with that. So when police officers are afraid for one reason or another, they start reverting back to that implicit guidance and control pathways. And they stop taking away some of the analytical and the rationale and the problem solving aspects. The current push for police officers to de-escalate and to use crisis intervention, those are positive things, right?
Right.
Because you want to try to maintain your composure. Every police officer knows that there's folks that get on the police radio and they start screaming, and everybody that's coming to help you is now getting amped up. They're getting nervous and anxious versus somebody else, a more seasoned officer getting on the radio, experiencing this same exact shit show out there that's calm, collected, clear, very methodical on the radio. The responders that he's getting to help are going to be cool and collected, right? So there's this contagiousness aspect that we talk about.
Okay, so that's one side. On the other side, you have a non-cooperative person. I'm not going to say criminal, but just somebody who thinks that, hey, F the police, they're all wrong. So if you have that context where everybody's amped up, they're coming to a scene, a situation, and their senses are heightened, they're ready for action or whatever, they're leaning on that system one. Now you got this non-cooperative person that hasn't gone through any psychology. It hates the police and starts going at them. That's what I'm concerned about is when you see things like that, why would you put yourself, just again, non-cooperative person, just why would you attack the police? I don't understand that. What are they trying to gain out of that?
I would venture to say that the vast majority of police uses of force that we collect data on in my agency, let's say, is for somebody to get away, right? It's like basically I will attack or resist with the intention of ultimately getting away and not be taken into custody. I'm not sure if anybody's got really good answers about just these unprovoked attacks. Like, why would somebody walk up to a police car and just start firing point blank into the side windows and basically execute the police?
That's happened. I mean, I've seen one
A lot of times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what that does, going back to your point about your 98 video, is, you're a police officer, you see these reports or whatever on X or TikTok about something happening, you get the notification about this. That's got to do something to the psyche, of the police officer, the police. I mean, it's got to be uncomfortable being a police officer. In fact, we don't have time to go into today. The when it comes to trauma, the way I understand it is first responders have more trauma than military personnel, right? Based off the line of work. Because you see more than we'll ever see in a lifetime, more than likely. I mean, there are some special operators that see a lot of awful things. But in general, and I'm just kind of painting a picture, maybe we could have another conversation on this in the future, but it changes your orientation, which changes how you sense, decide, and act, right? When you see things like that.
Yeah, I mean, this job changes you, right? I'm in year 28 now, and I wouldn't say I'm a happier person now than I was 28 years ago. I mean, when you're kind of forced into seeing bad things, that just chips away at you. I think that the things that I have positive is that I have a positive home life. I have a positive support structure. I have a team of believers that I hang out with, from church and in my personal life, that kind of recalibrate me, So that's positive, so when we're talking about, officer wellness and resilience, you got to do things that remind you that you're doing the right things for the right reasons, right? Like with a sense of purpose. Like this isn't a crusade, right? But you can still make small changes, small positive impacts on your community without it being like this overarching crusade that you're trying to fight. But this is why there's entire fields of psychology that are dedicated to first responder psychology and first responder wellness. It's
It goes
basically a
back to the
cottage
human
industry.
aspects. I mean, that's a big the human aspects, right? Do those
Yeah,
like
and
because we were talking earlier about things like body cams and dash cams, and the medium is the message and has an effect on people and the way they behave. Just like you were saying, the drones have a way that they behave. How much of the human element of policing is lost with tech, and does it need to have a restoration of the human aspects, the human elements of it?
yeah, I mean, if all you deal with is criminals because you didn't bother getting out of your police car and meeting nice people, what impact does that have? Your exposures are manipulated because you've isolated yourself from the good people of the community.
Yeah.
I was on bicycle patrol as a young officer, and like it was all community relations. It was all talking to shop owners and folks walking their dogs and moms with their kids in the park. Like it was all dealing with good people in the community.
It's like The
That's
Village
healthy.
with Bing West. Did you ever read that book? We had Bing West on the show to talk about the Marine Combined Action Program, and they found that the assimilation and engaging with the human element served a lot more purpose than the sort of the capital applications of combat of dumping tonnage and shooting people and having high body counts and things like that. And they found that by integrating 15 Marines into a village of 2,500 people, they had a lot more effect on turning the tide than they were doing by force, coercion, raw combat. I wonder if I know that like I grew up in Pittsburgh, and they called COP. It was community oriented policing, and we had police that walk around on beats, and they knew everybody, and they knew all the store owners, and kind of like you were describing earlier. I mean, how far removed are we from that? And when it takes something like that to restore sort of sort of reorient the people that are inherently hostile to police, for whatever reason, or is there an inherent hostility that when a police officer walks into a store and they look like RoboCop? I mean, they've got helmets and bulletproof vests and every weapon and every lethal, non-lethal thing they could. What kind of tone does that set? You know what I mean? I don't know. Just thinking about the restoration of sort of the human aspects of policing, kind of like a combined action sort of approach that's been tested and proven and used even as recent as Afghanistan. It reduces a lot of violence and reduces a lot of hate and discontent, for lack of a better term.
I think one of the worst things we did in terms of community policing is by making it a position,
Mm,
right? We took certain officers and says, you're now the community officer. And what that did is it said your role is to schedule events, walk around, make friends with the public, but it also sent a different message, much
mhm,
more implicitly, which was the rest of you, that's not your job anymore.
mhm,
So we now have officers that their whole jobs are to plan special events and meetups and coffee with cops and Citizens Police Academy. Great programs, but that's their role. And it's basically told the rest of us that you don't have to be involved in that stuff, which is the wrong message. It needs to be thematic across everybody.
yeah,
Everybody is a community officer.
right.
Everybody needs to get out of their car and talk to folks. So there,
Yeah,
there's
that
there's
there's
some
a
agencies that are getting that. They're right. They're basically realigning that way.
yeah, that ideal of these are our sons and daughters that protect and serve us. They come from us. This is our community. They're protecting life, liberty, and property. It feels to me that there's been a big disconnect. As I don't know if it's tech. I don't know what it is, but I mean, I think tech might have a role in it, but when you lose that human when you lose that human touch, you lose that human aspect. I think that's where things start to go awry, and I think where things start to get disconnected. You ever read hear about One Tribe at a Time, James Gant, like that kind of approach where, again, it goes back to, like, we had Bing West on talking about the combined action program in Vietnam, where they weren't outside the village, they were in the village, and John Boyd talked about that in Patterns of Conflict, in the transcript, that the Marines were successful and the Green Berets were successful because they were in the villages, not from coming in from outside the villages. And I wonder if a lot of that sort of, being from the outside, that creates sort of that us versus them that we see, because there is a very clear us versus them, whether it's authentic or not, or whether it's, concocted or not, that people do have not all, but many people do have an animosity towards law enforcement that they don't have for firefighters, they don't have for post office workers or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, how does
Yeah,
that, how can the human element, the people, ideas, and things, how can that disarm the, and sort of reorient what policing is actually, the value of it, keeping us all safe,
I also think that the squeaky wheel gets the grease,
Yeah.
right? In that it's the opponents of policing, that want to defund us. They're the ones that are loud and vocal,
Yeah.
right? They're shouting from the rooftops and waving banners. I still believe that there's a lot of great people that are supporting the police. They support a law and order society that just simply aren't as loud. They're not
Mhm.
they're not going to host a rally. They're not going to, hang a banner on that. But I've always measured it locally by how many trays of cookies or trays of food come into the police station, on the weekends and during the holidays. And it's a lot. There's still people out there that love us, that support us. There's still places that we go that we can't buy a cup of coffee because somebody wants to treat us to it.
Mhm.
So just a gentle reminder to all the police listeners out there that people support us. We just don't hear them as much.
Well,
We have
even
to.
though even the ones that don't support you, they certainly want you to show up when they're in the situation. We didn't really talk on some of the other things that you probably see a lot of. Certainly see it a lot here in a city like Manhattan. The pandemic use of opiates, and are cops still carrying Narcan? Is opiate abuse still something that you're seeing a lot of, that officers on the ground are dealing with?
Yeah, there was kind of a separation between urban and rural. So in the
Mhm.
rural, you were seeing the meth, and then in the urban areas, you were seeing the heroin and the opiates. Basically, the police don't care about weed anymore. It's everywhere, kind of evidenced by just walking down the street and it just permeating the air. I feel
Mhm.
like it's almost like ruined a lot of the urban areas by just having to expose myself to the stink weed.
Oh man, it's here in Manhattan. It's everywhere. I mean, you walk by Wall Street offices and you smell weed. You walk into the subway. You walk out of a restaurant. You walk through a park. You walk down the street. It's literally everywhere. What is funny though, having my family's originally from here, and having grown up around this place a lot, coming here quite often, I do notice that now, living here full time, I do kind of joke to myself, it does seem a lot more mellow than it had been in years past, because maybe it's just because everybody's high on weed. Like, I guess back in the 80s when I was a kid, and I remember shit being so crazy, I guess everybody was on coke. I guess they've traded it for weed, so it's a lot calmer. But I mean, so that's more. I mean, they're not busting that anymore, right? I mean, like, what effects has that had on narcotics cops?
I'm kind of shocked that there's still drug units in police departments.
Yeah,
There's still a lot of money involved in it, and there's still a lot of other illicit crimes. You start getting into human trafficking, you start getting
yeah.
into weapons, money laundering. They're all connected. to drugs.
Talk more about the human trafficking. I mean, that's a big one. I think that people don't talk enough about. Although that when you go into places and you see, you know, in the airport bathroom, you see all the warning signs and things like that. You know, what are you seeing from your perspective on that, and what would you want people to know and orient to on the concept of human trafficking? I mean, the concept.
Well,
I
I mean,
mean,
you've got
the realities of it.
yeah, I mean, you've got vulnerable folks that are being exploited by organized criminals, making money, deriving power off of others' misfortune.
Mm,
So, you know, I've seen girl runaways, right, that just get trapped into these criminal networks. They're
hmm
getting exploited. They're being forced into committing other crimes, identity thefts, and organized retail crimes. And I mean, that's not even talking about the sexual side of this stuff. You know,
Yeah.
they're being used as pawns in a game that creates an insulating layer from the actual criminals that are making a lot of money on this.
hmm
You know, and once you start holding that power over somebody, like, I think the big debate is how much control do they have over their own actions, and
How
do they
pervasive is
realize it?
it? How pervasive is it in the United States? Human trafficking.
I don't know. You know, and there's groups out there that say it's in every community, and you know, I think that might be a little bit of an over exaggeration, but I think it's so lucrative that these organized criminals have figured out how to manipulate. I mean, this is a psychological game that they play, right? It's psychological control over these victims of human trafficking, end up becoming offenders in other crimes. So it's up to us as the police to figure out how these folks play into it. I worked a case maybe last year where I was able to identify 3 of the women that were being trafficked. And it wasn't them that I wanted to build criminal cases and indictments on. It was their handlers that stayed just insulated enough to be out of reach of being arrested and indicted. It was super unfortunate. So how do we handle this? Do we
When you
still
think,
do we still indict the women that basically don't want to leave that environment because it's all they know, it's how they've been groomed and conditioned.
how do
To
you
them, it's just
assess?
survival.
How would you, you know, we've heard the term cops are robbers and cat and mouse and whatever, and there's orientation versus orientation. You know, how do you see the criminal orientation? And I get it. There's different types of crimes, right? Human trafficking is different than petty larceny, and it's different than assault, and different than battery, and you know, murder, and everything else. But generally speaking, like the committed criminal, the committed criminal organization, how do you see them reorienting given all the technological changes and other things? Now, granted, they don't have the same legal constraints because they don't follow municipal codes and the laws of this, you know, this land. How do you see their orientations evolving, say, since you've been in since 98 to now? Because let's face it, if they're not reorienting as faster than you are, they're going to win every time, right? So how do you see that evolution?
I mean, we see them adapting to our tactics all the time.
hmm
So some of the technology, it's not a secret, it collects license plates. And so now what do we see? Ghost license plates, no license plates, stolen license plates. And those are all in attempts to throw us off and put us on a different trail.
hmm
They know that we're using drones. They know we're using helicopters. So what do? They know how to use tunnels, roadways that go underground, and tree canopies. They understand that. So they're evolving, right?
Yeah.
And they're evolving without like you said, without the need for department policy. They didn't have to come up with some structure or SOP or checklist.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
They just figured it out organically.
Yeah.
So what I feel like we're in now is we're in such a rapid state of tech growth in public safety that we have the opportunity to kind of like we got the momentum, and we need to exploit that momentum and use it before they figure it out,
hmm
right? Because once they figure it out,
Yeah.
then
Once
our
they've
technology is
reoriented to it, then
no good.
yeah.
Right. And I guess that's the other side of police transparency. We want to be supported by our citizenry and the constituency of these elected officials. We want that support. So we want to talk about the things that we're using, how we're using it. We want to showcase our successes, but at what cost? Because the cost is giving up tradecraft. The cost is explaining how we do things so somebody else could then use it against us and find the countermeasure. So it's a balancing act of how much do we give up? How much do we talk about? What do we release? And is showcasing what we do actually counterproductive to us?
What do you see in your drift through time? As your orientation has changed quite a bit since 1998, and you see young officers coming into the force now. Has the vocation changed? Like the vocation reasons that we're calling you to be a law enforcement officer, are they different, similar? How would you compare and contrast of this Gen Z that was born after 9/11, they don't know what it's like to live without cell phones and that sort of thing, and social media. Do you see any differences in their vocation to becoming police officers, and what similarities are there? I'm sure there's both.
Yeah, I mean, back when you became the police, you kind of stayed put and you did 25 and or 30 years. You were looking for this pension at the end. Then, unfortunately, a couple years later, you died, and that was kind of the life cycle of the police. But now you've got folks coming in, they're sampling it for a little bit, they're giving it a couple of years, they're going out, they're finding greener pastures and private industry. They're working for the tech companies that we work with in the real-time crime center space,
Hmm.
and they kind of float in and float out sometimes. So that person that comes in is becoming rarer and rarer to stick with it, that this has been a calling for them their entire life, and this is what they want to do.
Hmm. Have the standards shifted? Like I know in the military, say it's harder and harder to find kids that are physically fit and not on SSRIs or that kind of thing. Is it harder to find good recruits for police forces?
I mean, I tested back in 1997. I was one of 182 candidates for a position, right? One position. And then you go through some rough spots where there's questioning whether or not you're being supported and properly funded, how secure this job is going to be for you, the stability. Now you're getting 30 and 40 applicants. So the pool of folks is really reduced. So you can only figure that you're not going to be getting the best of the best. You know that there's a reason why high school sports are classified based in the sizes in athletic competitions, right? You,
Hmm.
you don't have small high schools competing against ginormous high schools in sports because of the talent pool that's there.
Right. Do you find that, the numbers have reduced to the quantity, but do you also see that in general the quality is a lot different?
Yeah, I think it goes hand in hand. When you get more, you get to handpick that quality candidate that comes out.
Mm-mm.
You know, there's a movement years ago to switch over to 4-year degree requirements in a lot of police agencies, and they said we're going to get a more professionalized candidates. Like, but are you? Like, I've seen plenty of horrible reports being written by college graduates, and I've seen
How
excellent
about
reports
veterans?
from those that did.
How about veterans coming in? Is that still a good pool for you guys?
That is a great pool for us. They understand discipline. They understand a sense of mission. They understand sense of teamwork and camaraderie. Yeah, we very heavily recruited into the military.
How much impact do you have in I guess, let me back up. So you have a solid understanding of authentic John Boyd and Canevin and OODA loop and everything else. What are the learning opportunities inside of law enforcement? What's the opportunity cost of not learning and understanding those things as you do? What would be the benefit if more officers, more people in law enforcement understood those things as you do?
You know, there's system dynamics at play, right?
Hmm.
From whether it be systems thinking or complexity thinking, you start bringing in Canevin to understand what the dynamics and the relationships are between variables in the system. Those things have radically changed the way that I look at my job and what my sense of purpose is here. It's changed the way I act as not only a police officer or detective, right, in operationally, but it changes what I do when I'm asked to help design new policy, I'm a supervisor. So how do I supervise? And in what contexts do different styles of supervision, leadership, management, like that whole debate? How do you behave as a supervisor in what contexts? As a trainer, how should you be training these things? The differences between practice and education and training and repetition and scenarios and debriefing. How does all that factor into it? How does information flow throughout the system? So from data to intelligence to defining department strategies to defining incident strategy, all of those things are all refined when you have a systems complexity or Kinevin thinking model behind you. I just recently went through a command school for supervisors and command level folks in policing run by a university. And at the end of it, I basically offered up, I said, this class needs a healthy dose of systems thinking and bringing all these disparate topics. It's almost as if the instructors would come in as a patchwork. What if we were able to bring this together into how all of these different things fit? Right? How does officer wellness and use of force training relate? How does real-time crime center technology and use of force connect? How does department strategy impact recruitment? So all these things are just interconnected, and there's few folks that are looking at from that interconnected web. They don't want to look at it in a networked way. They want to look at each of these things as its own individual piece, division, unit, office, with its own little command structure. And I
So
think when you go to bring it together, it's exhausting. It is
yeah,
exhausting when you start bringing it together. So it's just easier to leave it separate and let folks do their own thing.
yeah. So like I mean, I guess that is you're describing silos essentially inside of organizations that don't want to play nice or cooperate with others or share information and that kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe they don't see how they relate, right? So
Uh-huh.
maybe it's not that they don't want to, it's just they don't see how this impacts another part of the system.
Yeah.
When you push on the balloon, right, it's going to blow out somewhere else,
Yeah.
and it's hard to get all stakeholders from all these teams together in the same room to talk about these. Because sometimes, let's be honest, the function of those units is to make sure that the unit remains, right?
Like to
Like
keep
officer wellness, right? Like the worst thing that for officer wellness, cottage industry, would be for cops to just be well, because all those folks are because all those folks are out of a job.
That's right. Well, if crime went away, if we defeat all the criminals, there wouldn't be a need for cops anymore. I've heard that about like charities, like the charity for the pet project of whatever, disease or who knows what. If that goes away, then the charity goes away, and then we don't have the cycling race anymore. We don't have the ability to make everybody wear a, you know, whatever. I don't know.
Black tie galas no more.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. That's somebody's livelihood. Interesting. Well, close us out, Lou. What do you think? What are you reading? Anything exciting? What are things that others should be thinking about to reorient their perspective to law enforcement in this day and age?
This is all about maintaining a detective mentality,
Hmm.
right? The detective mentality is that you might have your own theory or theories of what happened or how the world works or what the world should look like. Everybody's got their own theory or theories on that. And it's up to us to disprove them one at a time to refine what reality is. When we piece together criminal investigations, we we seek out information to disprove things that we believe. That's a much healthier way. Is seek out not which confirms to you, but that which attacks your theory.
Wow, that sounds
That's what the most,
that sounds very John Boydie.
and I think we can do that by adopting a systems or complexity approach. I mean, that's what brings guys like, you, Ponch, and me together is this complexity side of things. And when we see how our actions impact things upstream or downstream, and we have a greater appreciation for the system,
Hmm.
right? It's not what makes Lou's life easier. It's not what makes Lou's team's easier. It's not what makes my department easier. It's what makes the community safer and healthier, right? That's ultimately our customer, right? The customer is not my team, not my organization, but
It's the
the
citizen.
community.
Yeah, the community. Yeah. Well, good stuff. Well, we could go on for hours. We'll put a pin in this. And are you still keeping the Illinois model going, or is that getting revised, or how's that? What's the state of that website?
Yeah, the Illinois model was a way for me to stay connected to folks that were going through my classes and my workshops. It was a way for me to keep pushing information out to them. Run out of time. My kids are super busy. Home life, very busy, chaotic, but it still very much exists. There's still a lot of activity that comes through that. The IllinoisModel.com is not going away anytime soon, but you're not going to be seeing the posting with the feverishness that I had before. Most of where you can find me now is on LinkedIn. It's where I'm preaching my own gospel.
I used to be a big fan of John Boyd had a LinkedIn page. I don't know if you knew about that.
Well, he lasted for a couple of weeks, and it's a shame that somebody had to rat me out about that.
I thought it was awesome.
That was a lot of fun. I mean, it said right there,
especially when on somebody's, somebody would write some bullshit that had nothing to do with John Boyd, and you would come in and, well, no, John Boyd would come in and say, I never said that. That actually made, I've written some damning things about LinkedIn. I'm so fed up. LinkedIn, the value is just, I don't see it anymore, but that actually made LinkedIn enjoyable. So thank you for that, for keeping me engaged for all those years.
Yeah.
So, all right, Lou, for the sake of recording, we'll stop here. We'll see you again. And thanks for coming on, and we'll be in touch, and we'll do this again.
Yeah, Moose and Punch. Thanks, guys. We'll see you later.
All right, sweet.